impeccably well cast film. It's kind of hard to imagine anyone but Skarsgård playing that role. He's got such a kind of
yeah, he's great.
An intellectual, you know, kind of always on the fence kind of vibe. You could go either way with that guy, you never know.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that process and I don't know, how it felt to find the right people, if you, yeah, and the directing?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been thinking about this character for a long time, and it's, I think when I was really interested in working with Peter. He was kind of the only person I wanted to work with on the role, but I had no way to get to him. And but because we weren't, you know, we were gunning to make the movie, but a lot of things weren't moving. I had a lot of time to think about it, and I guess try to campaign to get him involved. And I didn't know where to start, but fortunately I have a relationship with the same manager's company, Anonymous Content, that he does. And they said they could get him the script right away. And so I kind of jumped into gear and I wrote him kind of a long love letter of sorts, just I suppose just telling him how great I think he is. And I described him, I think, as kind of a chameleon. He plays a lot of characters, and I think is what's really you know, great about his talents is that he can play so many different parts and is completely different in reality, obviously, and is just a wonderful human being. But he responds to the script right away, and I think by the time he read the script and read my letter, we were sitting down and talking about the movie within a couple days, and we were talking about, you know, his interest in music, and he considers himself to have absolute pitch, similar to the character he plays that he does. So I knew that there was a kind of a deeper connection he had with the role, and I guess that assured for me that he was on board for it. But then, you know, as things go, it's from that moment, we had no money at that moment. It was a full year before we were physically, you know, rolling and making the movie. And so in my mind, it was just, I think, you know, he meets with a lot of directors and gets a lot of projects. But in my mind, that was the only thing I was doing. So it's just kind of keeping him engaged. So I would set up kind of scenarios for us to hang out, I suppose, to, you know, build a relationship, but also just for me to help, you know, like think about the movie. And so one of the first things we did was I had him over my apartment, and we one thing is, you know, Ben Neighbors and I, you know, we had written the script, but we had been working on it for so many years, and it's in script form, so you get kind of tired of reading it in your head and amongst each other. So I thought, since I have this great actor who I want to play, you know, the main role, I would at least have him read it out loud. So I set up, you know, a recorder, and I played all the other parts, but I at least had, you know, this asset of his voice in, you know, on an audio recorder. And then it was great because I could hear the movie for the first time, and I turned that into, I guess, kind of like an odd animatic in a way, where I put it into a timeline, and at first it resembled kind of like a radio theater version of the movie that I could listen to, and then you start dropping in music and pictures and things, and you can start to watch the movie. And it was useful for me just to kind of, you know, keep this thing going, and you know, to keep the gas in the engine, so that I could have a better, I suppose, another sort of blueprint outside the script when we finally got into production.
So he was pretty cool with that?
He was very cool with it, yeah. I mean, he's I think he was a champion of the movie from the beginning, and certainly, you know, like as we were making it too, and I just couldn't have asked for anything better. My co-writer and I, who's a producer, Ben Neighbors, we were very adamant early on for, I mean, convincing people that this was a movie that needed to be made was a challenge, and accounts for a lot of those years in development. But one thing we wanted to make sure people understood was this is a movie, you know, that had sound as a plot point, but also took sound very seriously. So we made a rule that any sound that was in the script we would you know, put in caps. And in screenplays there's, you know, a strict kind of formula that you keep to, but Normally you have characters in all caps in the script, and we wanted sound to be as important as a character. That was, if you were to look at the script, there's a lot of kind of sound that's identified early on, and you keep that as a manual, and or like the blueprint, if you will, and you try to bring those things to set. But then the reality of shooting a movie about sound on a pretty small budget and a short amount of time in New York City it's a very loud city to shoot a movie in, kind of unironically, but it's a lot of filmmaking in general, not just this movie, is this kind of sleight of hand to creative reality that wasn't there on the day. And with sound, as much as we put emphasis on that, it's really kind of, we were afforded a kind of a nicer sound edit, where I had the luxury, the Dolby family, I knew Dolby as kind of a big glossy corporation, but it's actually a really intimate family business behind it, and they took a liking to our script when it was in script form, and I think saw maybe a kindred spirit in the character and the founder of Dolby, and saw that we were doing something seriously and treating sound seriously, and helped us to have a very comfortable time in order to mix the film. At the end of the edit of the film, we usually have a tight schedule to do what's called the sound edit, and we had just about a month, which felt really proper. Still not a lot of time to do a lot, but got to experiment a bit more than I would have been able to otherwise, which was really important to help it stretch out.
And I would imagine that the sound designers that you decided to work with, that you must have chosen very carefully. Was that process difficult to find the right team to help you with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we fortunately had a long time to kind of think about it, and because we were I guess kind of mapping it out so early, we had more time than usual than when you're kind of at that crunch time. And one thing I did early on, I was invited by the Sundance Institute in the middle of our edit, brought me out to Skywalker Ranch, which is a very nice sound mixing facility in California, to experiment with sound design. And it informed me before we even had our sound designers on the film, kind of how to work better with that team. And sometimes sound can be a language, I suppose, all its own, that I might not get all the nomenclature correctly, but you try to communicate as best as possible with that department. And what this experience at Skywalker taught me was not only how to communicate better with that team, but also to pair them with our composer. So at that point, we were working on the musical score of the movie, and one of the best things I learned from that experience was having a dialogue between those two departments, which are also usually working separately. And I knew that I wanted to kind of replicate that when we got to the mix on our film, and I did to the best that I could. In our case, our composer was working on the West Coast in Los Angeles, and we were mixing the sound in New York, but we were doing it at the same time, and we were constantly talking and throwing things back and forth, because I feel that sound design is as much score as score is as much sound design, and when they're working in tandem, I feel like they're serving the image best, so to speak, and that was something that was really important early on that we wanted to bring to life.